You would be living under a rock if you haven't seen this meme before. A Photoshop Snapchat selfie of Leonardo DiCaprio with the text, "Don't turn 25, you're so sexy, aha." This meme refers to DiCaprio's propensity to only date women under the age of 25. For years, it's been my personal go-to image to send to any friend turning 25. And actually, Sabrina Carpenter made this meme the center design of her own 25th birthday cake last year. According to Know Your Meme, the memification of DiCaprio's dating history started in 2016 when writer Christina Cauterucci published an article on Slate that brought attention to his reported dating pattern. Then in 2019, Reddit user Trust Little Brother published a graph that depicted Leo's age steadily increasing while the average age of his girlfriend stayed exactly the same. Then in 2022, it was reported that DiCaprio and his long-term girlfriend, Camila Morrone, had split up, an event that took place a couple months after her, you guessed it, 25th birthday. The jokes write themselves. Their relationship also allegedly started when she was 20 in 2017, and at that time, Leo was 43. As you can expect, the internet went crazy. One Twitter user wrote, referring to the breakup news, "There's no phenomenon on this planet more reliable than Leonardo DiCaprio breaking up with his girl by age 25. The stats are breathtaking." Nowadays, Leo is dating Vittoria Soretti, who actually is 26, so it seems like maybe Leo is moving his age bracket up. Leo, of course, is not the only man in Hollywood who prefers dating younger women. Bradley Cooper dated Suki Waterhouse when he was 38 and she was 21, which was interesting because earlier the same year, he rejected dating rumors between himself and Jennifer Lawrence by saying, "I could literally be her father." Jennifer Lawrence was 22 at the time. Bradley and Suki also have an infamous photo op where he's reading Lolita to her in the park. Honestly, no words, just need to know what was going through his publicist's mind. Nowadays, Bradley is dating Gigi Hadid, with whom he has a 20-year age gap with. While Camila Morrone and Suki Waterhouse have never publicly shared negative feelings about their previous relationships with older men, this is not always the case for the younger female partners in an age gap dynamic. Surprise, surprise. Taylor Swift's song All Too Well is supposedly a nod to her relationship with Jake Gyllenhaal when she was 20 and he was 29. The 10-minute version of the song she released in 2021 focuses more on the age gap toxicity of the relationship. She writes, "You said if we had been closer in age, maybe it would have been fine, and that made me want to die. And I was never good at telling jokes, but the punchline goes, I'll get older, but your lovers stay my age." Jake Gyllenhaal's current girlfriend is Jan Cadu, a French model who is 28 years old and was 21 when they started dating in 2018. Gyllenhaal is 44 and was 37 at the time. While age gap couples consisting of an older man and a younger woman are definitely more common, internet wrath over age gaps of any gender have been rampant for years. Sarah Paulson has noted that she gets horrifying comments about her relationship with Holland Taylor. They have a 32-year age gap, though they started dating when Paulson, the younger one, was already in her 40s. So way past prefrontal cortex development. There's also always nasty comments about Sam and Aaron Taylor Johnson, though I think that one's more concerning because she started dating him when he was 18. Needless to say, age gap relationships are very controversial, and yet I feel like they are a mainstay in the Hollywood canon. So let's discuss why they're such an important trope, even with all the haters. Getting warmer here in California. I mean, it's always warm, but you know what I mean. And so I've been really gravitating towards a very light, radiant look these days. I'm working with Typology today. Don't know why I'm showing my 5 head. I'm working with Typology today to talk about my easygoing summer makeup routine. Their moisturizer is 99% naturally derived, has been dermatologically tested, and is suitable for sensitive skin. The glow drops are, of course, glowy. The drops are also enriched with vitamin C and aloe vera. I really like this product. Sometimes I mix it in with my moisturizer. Sometimes I literally just apply it straight to the face. Usually in the summertime, I try to be light on makeup because anything heavy is prone to melting off my face and then making me look insane. So this is just a really great product for me and just very easy. I'm topping off my look with the tinted lip oil in the shade Black Cherry. Typology's lip oil is enriched with vitamin E, squalane, and jojoba oil. I like how this has a non-sticky but still glossy finish. For a limited time, you can receive a free purifying mask with charcoal and organic nettle on orders $40 or more using the link below.
But I'm not 15.
Well, that's the trouble. You're too old for me.
Marcus is so funny.
Oh, isn't that kind of like dated?
It's funny though.
Right. He's like older than us, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's like a power imbalance?
No. I mean, yes, he's technically old, but he has a young heart.
Like how?
He just has a young spirit. Like he doesn't know how to cook. And he plays a lot of video games. He doesn't do laundry.
He doesn't do laundry?
He just buys new shirts and uses the old ones as napkins.
Okay.
Okay. He's like older on paper, but I honestly feel like he's younger than me.
And you like that?
It's refreshing. Like the other day, he got mad and threw his blocks at me.
Why was he playing with blocks?
He's a creative.
Okay, so it sounds like he is very old and maybe also very immature.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know about this guy.
He's also really good at pranks. I mean, like one time, he convinced me that I had a long lost sister, and when I found out she wasn't real, it was like someone died.
Oh my God.
I flew to Albuquerque.
Okay, so you're gonna break up with him.
Yeah.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
Despite the backlash that celebrity couples can face today for their age gap, there was a time when this was all considered very normal, at least in Hollywood. Debbie Reynolds starred opposite Gene Kelly in Singing in the Rain when she was 19 and he was 40. Kim Novak starred opposite Jimmy Stewart in Vertigo when she was 25 and he was 50. Julia Roberts was 21 in Pretty Woman opposite Richard Gere, who was 40. And 22-year-old Gemma Arterton was the romantic interest of 40-year-old Daniel Craig in Quantum of Solace. As recently as a few years ago, there were people outraged by the 20-year age gap between Cillian Murphy and Florence Pugh in Oppenheimer. They played J. Robert Oppenheimer and Jean Tatlock, respectively, two people who had a comparatively modest 10-year age gap in real life. And of course, these age gaps sometimes transcended the silver screen too. The most famous case, or at least most famous to me, is probably Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart's relationship. They started dating in 1944 when she was 19 and he was 44, and they were married up until Bogart's death in 1957. They met on the set of To Have and Have Not, where they played love interests, of course, and to every intimacy coordinator's nightmare, during their courtship, they would sometimes refer to each other by their character names, Slim and Steve.
You know you don't have to act with me, Steve.
News outlets didn't obsess over this dynamic in the same way they obsessed today over, say, DiCaprio's love life. Studio executives were actually delighted and took no hesitation in promoting them as a romantic couple. As an example, Marty Weiser pitched this story to a colleague in the publicity department. Bogart and Bacall rehearse a kiss for 4.5 hours straight before the cameras, for a kiss which on the screen will last a few seconds. Story might contain statistics such as the amount of lipstick and Kleenex used. Still, the couple faced some criticism. Bogart was allegedly consumed by their age difference, and it wasn't helped by his ex-wife, Mayo Method, referring to Bacall as your daughter when they talked. Bacall's family disapproved of their union as well. Lauren's uncle Charlie wrote to her in a letter, "You must make no important decisions until we have talked them over, preferably face to face. Experience is an important factor in dealing with life, and 20 is too young for experience." But from a press standpoint, it seemed like there was less concern over the power imbalances that came with an age gap. Time magazine admitted they didn't report on the age difference or age gaps at all during this era, aside from a 1969 piece that was actually pro-age gaps, titled In Praise of May-December Marriages. Most coverage on Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart as an item were pretty positive. The pair would go on to make another 3 successful movies together, and when they married in 1945, the Knoxville News-Sentinel covered it with a piece titled Bad Boy Bogart and Sultry Bacall Have Not Tied Today. I think it's very interesting how the term boy de-ages Bogart, while the term sultry makes Bacall seem like a much more mature woman. While age gap relationships seemed rampant all over Hollywood, this wasn't a widespread epidemic in the US. In actuality, across a 100-year period, Kelly Fagan found that the mean difference in age between spouses was 4.07 years in 1910, shrinking to 1.86 years in the 2010 to 2014 range. Part of the reason for the specifically Hollywood age gap is because of the gender gap for working actors. There's a number of statistics over the years about this. According to one 2023 study published in Forbes, female characters on screen were typically younger than men, with a significant drop-off once women hit their 40s. Most male characters in 2023 were over 40, 52%, but only 28% of female characters were over 40. People magazine apparently once published a cover that asked, "Why are leading actors matched with co-stars half their age?" I couldn't actually find the cover, but it was mentioned in a Psychology Today article. Anyways, according to the article, people suggested that the possibility was because Hollywood directors tended to be older men who were trying to relive their youth. I'm sure since most Hollywood screenwriters are also men, they're essentially writing self-insert fantasies. You might think I'm joking, but Howard Hawks, who was the director of To Have and Have Not, was actually a total creep who was not only jealous of Bogart and Bacall's relationship, but would try to get with Bacall himself. Bacall told Vanity Fair, and he would also like to get me into his bed, which, of course, horrors. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I was so frightened of him. He was the old gray fox, and he always told me stories of how he dealt with Carol Lombard and Rita Hayworth. According to biographer Eric Lax, who co-wrote Bogart, Hawks was so upset by Bacall's rejection that he had an affair with Dolores Moran, the other main female actress in the film who was 30 years younger than him. None of these things were really sensationalized or even talked about at the time. It really wasn't until the Me Too era that these dynamics, both real and fictional, started to get more attention. For example, Woody Allen's film Manhattan came out in 1979 and was lauded by critics at the time. Roger Ebert described the fictional relationship between Woody's character and a 17-year-old girl, played by Mariel Hemingway, as an affair and had little to criticize about the disturbing age difference. In fact, he actually praised the narrative, writing, "It wouldn't do, you see, for the love scenes between Woody and Mariel to feel awkward or to hint at cradle snatching or an unhealthy interest on Woody's part in innocent young girls. But they don't feel that way. Hemingway's character has a certain grave intelligence, a quietly fierce pride that, strangely enough, suggests that even at 17, she's the one Woody should be thinking of during Gershwin's Someone to Watch Over Me." AKA, Mariel seems mature enough, so it's totally fine she's dating a grown man. The fact that Ebert, one of the most prominent film critics ever, was comfortable writing and publicizing this assessment also goes to show attitudes for the time period, where age gap romances, even ones involving a teenager, were just not that big a deal.
She's got homework. I'm dating a girl who does homework.
But the explosion of Me Too around 2017 changed the cultural narrative at large, prompting industries to take a hard look at all the power dynamics going on, including age. For example, as the public reevaluated Monica Lewinsky's story, they often started mentioning Clinton being 27 years her senior, and Monica has since emphasized her youth when discussing the issue. James Bessenval writes, referencing Monica Lewinsky, "There's now more of an understanding that just because someone is an adult, that doesn't mean they can't be exploited." Manhattan also was getting reevaluated, as well as Woody Allen's entire legacy, as he was accused of sexually abusing his adoptive daughter, Dylan Farrow, when she was 7 years old. Farrow initially came out with the story in 1992, but received more widespread attention after she wrote an open letter for the New York Times in 2014, following Allen receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Golden Globes. His marriage to his ex-wife, Mia Farrow's adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn, with whom he started dating when she was 21 and he was 56, was also getting criticized following a 2018 interview with her. At the Golden Globes in 2018, host Seth Meyers made a joke referring to Allen in his opening monologue. The Shape of Water received the most nominations of any film this year. Just an incredibly beautiful film, but I have to admit, when I first heard about a film where a naive young woman falls in love with a disgusting sea monster, I thought, oh man, not another Woody Allen movie. It's like Manhattan in water. Which just goes to show the changing attitudes. I think that because many Zoomers came of age during the Me Too era, we almost unilaterally have a strong distaste for age gap relationships. The Cuts viral article, The Age Gappers, pokes fun at some of the extremists in this cohort who keep changing the barometer for what's considered grooming. The article highlights how one person called out Chris Evans, 42, for marrying a child bride. His wife, Alba Batista, was 26. Florence Pugh also received pushback when she was dating Zach Braff. She was 24 and he was 45. She responded to the press at the time, "I'm old enough to be an adult and pay taxes, but I'm not old enough to know who I should and should not have sex with." Tweets like, "At 25, I wouldn't even date a 21-year-old," have gone viral with almost 80,000 likes. It seems like Hollywood has adjusted a bit, with less emphasis on putting the older man with a hot young thing on screen, lest they face backlash. Even though Miller's Girl, which I haven't seen, but apparently it didn't romanticize its central age gap relationship. And even though the movie's intimacy coordinator, Christina Arjona, told the Daily Mail that 52-year-old Martin Freeman and 21-year-old Jenna Ortega were never placed in unsafe situations, that did not stop audiences from criticizing the dynamic. Ellen Gamerman wrote for the Wall Street Journal, "Perceptions have changed. Heightened awareness about sexual harassment makes it harder to portray an older man, younger woman romance without fast entering creepy territory." But as I've said, age gap relationships have continued to stay, but they are no longer accepted as normative. Instead, the age gap relationship contributes commentary to the zeitgeist, whether it be through spotlighting the harm of a student-teacher relationship or by reinventing an existing trope, such as the MILF.
I'm too old for you.
The Hollywood example that I feel like most people refer to when talking about the older woman, younger man couple is the 1967 film The Graduate, which stars Anne Bancroft and Dustin Hoffman. In the movie, Hoffman's character Benjamin, who had just recently graduated college, returns to his childhood home to figure out what to do with his life. He meets his father's law partner's wife, Mrs. Robinson, who pursues an extramarital affair with Benjamin. And then we get one of the best needle drops in cinema history. Miller and Agnew referenced The Graduate in their 2011 study, explaining that the romance is so popularly remembered because of how it violates societal conventions.
Would you like me to seduce you?
What?
Not only is the relationship a cheating scandal, but conventions say that the heterosexual man tends to be older than their female partners. The researchers explain society does not tend to look favorably upon relationships in which the older partner is female, and the women involved are often judged in an especially harsh manner. In fact, rather than seeing them as women looking for true love, they are assumed to share Mrs. Robinson's desire to seduce or sexually prey upon young men, being stereotyped as cougars. What's ironic, though, is that even though Mrs. Robinson claims she's twice Benjamin's age, the actors who played them only have a 6-year age gap. Dustin Hoffman was playing a young college grad at age 30. Rachel Handler writes for Vulture, "Historically, the MILF has been the object of a film, rarely the subject. Or when she was the subject, she often found herself trapped in a grave drama or punished for her age-defying crimes." She notes that in The Graduate, Mrs. Robinson is an existential crisis generator, and thus a part of Benjamin's larger coming-of-age journey. By the end of the movie, he's more or less figured it out and settled down with a girl his own age. But over time, the MILF has become more of her own power player. Recent movies like A Family Affair, Lonely Planet, The New Bridget Jones, and The Idea of You show the MILF as a star of her own rom-com. While she deals with the same insecurities that younger rom-com characters face, the rom-com MILF usually has professional success under her belt, a previous toxic marriage in relief, and added insecurities over aging, of course. Anne Hathaway's character in The Idea of You, for instance, owns a successful contemporary art gallery, co-parents with a controlling ex-husband, and struggles through her own insecurities caused by being a woman over the hump of her mid-20s. As Robin Lee, the author of the original book, says, it was supposed to be a story about a woman approaching 40 and reclaiming her sexuality and rediscovering herself, just at the point that society traditionally writes women off. Serene Smith explains how age gap relationships can be transgressive in the media as a pushback against this culture which frames dating as a sort of clinical box-ticking exercise, where everybody only ever wants what's good for them. In a way, this new kind of leading lady in her romantic journey adds excitement and variety to the rom-com oeuvre that can feel so overdone, boring, and oversaturated. These dynamics are also transgressive in their representation of older women on screen in general. Historically, once actresses enter their 30s, they're pushed into playing older and less active and sexual roles, whereas male actors can play lovers or soldiers through most of their careers. Katha Pollitt wrote for the New York Times in 2001, Hollywood has always bumped women into older age roles. When older women appear at all on screen, they're not really older. 40-year-olds play women in their 50s. 50-year-olds play grandmothers, and then poof, they disappear. Except for one last go-around as the ancient survivor of the Titanic. Case in point, Angela Lansbury was only 37 when she played the mother of 34-year-old Lawrence Harvey in The Manchurian Candidate. It's unsurprising then that some people celebrate this gender flip age dynamic as being more progressive. For example, Jodie Walker wrote for The Ringer, older men have been dating decades younger women in movies since the beginning of time. So why shouldn't Laura Dern have a turn making out with Liam Hemsworth in an alleyway in a near shot-for-shot remake of Call Me By Your Name while under the Tuscan sunning it on a dreamy writer's retreat in Morocco, freed from the burden of the fact that when her excellent acting meets excellent writing, it results in memes so iconic that they will likely outlive her in the legacy of the films they came from. While I can agree that MILF romances add variety to the Hollywood norm, I don't know if they're necessarily progressive. Especially considering that the visual disparity between young and old seems far less noticeable these days. So many actresses now already look way younger than their years. And in my opinion, it's less interesting to show a 40-year-old woman who still looks 30 in a romantic and sexy context than it is to show a 40-year-old woman with, gray hair and an imperfect body in that same context. Constance Grady also wrote an excellent review of The Idea of You, which, I actually did enjoy that movie, but I think she makes great points relating to this. She writes, "The fantasy here is not a world in which women's social power doesn't depend on their sexual currency. The fantasy here is that a woman's sexual currency might not depreciate over the course of her 30s, particularly if the woman in question is played by Anne Hathaway, long celebrated for her eternal youthfulness." But ultimately, I think the reason why storytellers and audiences are drawn to MILF dynamics is because of all the nuances and complexities that can be interwoven into these stories. Maybe in part because of their relatively untapped potential compared to the gender reverse age gap, which is so ubiquitous in Hollywood. May December, for instance, was inspired by the real-life story of a female teacher who assaulted her male student, went to jail, and then later married and raised a family with him. In the movie, we enter their relationship years after the initial assault. Julianne Moore and Charles Melton play the couple Gracie and Joe, and Natalie Portman's character is a method actress cast in a biopic telling their story, and she spends time shadowing Gracie, and through her, we can observe what's really going on in this messed up relationship. I think it's interesting that we only see the origin story in the biopic, as Dana Stevens writes in a review, through a process of reenactment that inevitably distorts the truth. It's an interesting story technique because it also exposes the audience as voyeurs, complicit to using this tragic story and similar stories as fodder for our own entertainment. Charles Melton also literally acted his ass off, and I'm still mad he got snubbed from an Oscar nomination. There's this one scene in the movie towards the end, so spoilers, but he's watching his son graduate high school, and there's just this sadness in his face that I interpreted as him recognizing that he was never able to achieve these similar types of milestones and essentially never able to live a normal adult life because of what happened to him as a child. Psychologist Elizabeth Jeglick writes, "There is a strong theme in movies and pop culture about how every teenage boy's fantasy is to have a sexual relationship with their teacher. And in these cases of teacher-perpetrated abuse, the victim often views the behavior as consensual. It is often not until years later that the victim understands that the relationship was abuse." Baby Girl also tackles a toxic dynamic with a lot of nuance, I think. Nicole Kidman's character, Romy, is a CEO who becomes involved in a BDSM affair with an internetter company, Samuel, who's played by Harris Dickinson. While Romy is in clear power over Samuel via the hierarchy of the company, she's literally his boss, Samuel is persistent and even vindictive, dangling the threat of reporting her to HR whenever Romy tries to end their affair. We see him in the more aggressive role as Romy sexually submits to him, but also when he tests her non-sexual boundaries multiple times, like showing up at her home address uninvited. As director Helena Rain told The New Yorker, Dickinson plays someone who is incredibly vulnerable and also confused about what is expected of him, as a lot of men are right now. The fact that the relationship's power play intersects over multiple lines, work, class, age, gender, and sexual role play, allow for a more complicated, messy dynamic to develop. One that's not necessarily romantic, but interesting nonetheless. As Lewis Staples writes in his review of the film, if this year saw a spate of older women, younger men movies, shows, and books, perhaps it's because audiences are seeking something more complex, something that feels more like art than like content. After all, culture doesn't always have to reflect our ethical codes. At its best, it can help us to interrogate them. I also want to point out that Baby Girl, The Idea of You, and May December all repeat the old formula of pairing the legacy actor with the hot new actor. It's just like gender flipped now. And it makes sense why this is happening given that more women are in positions of power than ever before. The Wrap mentioned power players like Jennifer Salk at Amazon Studios, Donna Langley at Universal, and Bella Baharia at Netflix. This might explain the interest in exploring a wider range of women's stories. On top of that, the Wall Street Journal noted, industry data shows audiences are more likely to buy movie tickets to see older female stars than their 20-something counterparts. I think this actually might be more of like a generational thing, like for among audiences, because younger people, according to so many studies now, care less about movie stars, preferring content creators, whereas people from my mom's generation, let's say, still have affection for actresses like Natalie Portman and are willing to show up to the theater to watch them. Whatever the case, I think it's exciting, and because many of these stories are shaped with successful and powerful women in Hollywood, I've noticed that the stories are much less like problematic, for lack of a better word, in their portrayals of women, relationships, and abuse in general.
Call me by your name and I'll call you by mine.
Challengers Summer or Call Me By Your Name Summer? Is such a non-question. Like, IDK, would you rather two hot athletes fighting for your affection over almost 2 decades, or would you like to be groomed by Armie Hammer? The other kind of age gap romances we've seen lately in film has been the queer age gap romance. Think queer. Think Call Me By Your Name. Okay, maybe it's actually not that common and it's just Luca Guadagnino, but whatever, I still want to talk about it. And hot take, I actually didn't even like Call Me By Your Name when I first watched it. I watched this movie in my early 20s, and this was also before the Armie Hammer stuff came out, but I always thought the relationship was predatory. Timothée Chalamet's character Elio is 17, and his love interest Oliver, played by Armie, is 24, a graduate student who's interning for Elio's father and staying in their family home in Italy for the summer. At the time, I think I was just like so bothered by how everyone around me interpreted this movie as some great love story, and I was just like pushing back against that. Meanwhile, I noticed that, at least in 2017, when in movies the grooming involved an older man and a teenage girl, all my friends online and offline rallied against it, a la Miller's Girl. But a teenage boy, I mean, is also very vulnerable. Karamo Brown, who was the cultural expert on Queer Eye, as well as a licensed psychotherapist and a social worker, told Business Insider back in 2018 his feelings about Call Me By Your Name. I've worked with many survivors of sexual assault, especially in the LGBTQ community, which oftentimes goes unreported. And so the minute I saw that movie, I thought, here we are glorifying this sort of relationship. I think to myself, if that was an older man with a 16 or 17-year-old girl, we would have all had a hissy fit. We would have recognized that this is a problem, but for some reason, because it was 2 men, we're just like, oh, well, this is just exploration. When discussing this movie, my co-writer for this video, Am, told me when they first watched this film at 18, they perceived this movie as a complex depiction of a boy trying to navigate his desires and a failure of intimacy, and therefore not an objective endorsement for the relationship at hand. I think that is a great point, and I've actually since walked back my initial harsh judgments for this movie. But we also agree that the way the actors talked about their fictional relationship seemed like they themselves didn't understand that there's this line between depiction and endorsement. For example, some dude tweeted to Armie Hammer in 2017, "Wow, did you act in a film about pedophilia? Are you a pedophile? Do you promote such depravity? I was once a fan." Blech. To which Armie replied, "You do know that you live in a state where the age of consent is 16, right?" Okay, now shut up. Not the best clapback, because he's implying that it's fine, this relationship is fine because of the age of consent, which we all know age of consent laws are bullshit arbitrary laws. But without giving too much sympathy to Armie, I can see why he lashed out, because a lot of these pedophilia comments at the time were coming from right-wing homophobes rather than from people, actually concerned about gay teenagers. I think at least in progressive circles, queer age gap relationships operate in a pretty complex space because there's this confusion on what's like objectively right and wrong. Age gap relationships may be wrong no matter the gender, but they, at least from the experiences of some of my gay friends, also may be a part of a common coming of age story that deserves to be shown on screen and not blasted just for being gay. I also think that while any relationship portraying an adult and a minor should not be endorsed, an age gap relationship between two adults can offer many interesting perspectives about human relationships, or specifically in this section, queer relationships. So for example, lesbian age is a concept where age and maturity are measured by how long someone has been out and their experiences in prior lesbian relationships. Not to say that lesbian relationships can't be toxic, but this introduces another maturity-related dynamic that isn't present in straight relationships. There's also the concept of the closet, like who has been out of it or has been forced to stay inside, which is also important context in the movie Carol. Carol depicts Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara in a 1950s age gap love affair. During this time period, their relationship would have been illegal, and Blanchett's character Carol has a controlling ex-husband who attempts to use her sexuality as a point against her in a custody dispute for their daughter. Carol has more experience navigating same-sex relationships, and she has wealth, which gives her power over Mara's character, Therese, but while they're both closeted, Carol might have different stakes related to the closet than Therese. Along that line, Mara has talked about the movie as being a coming-of-age story for both the characters. Both of the women are coming of age in a different way. They're both at a stage of life where they have to decide what kind of woman they're going to be, and if they're going to live their truth or continue on in this life that doesn't really feel like theirs. Queer is a more recent movie that explored a power imbalance inverted with age. Throughout the entire movie, William Lee, played by Daniel Craig, is clearly at the whims of Eugene Allerton, played by Drew Starkey. Lee is fully out, though he struggles with his queerness, often feeling some level of shame or self-loathing. Gene, on the other hand, is elusive. His tastes are not defined, as he'll sleep with Lee just as quickly as he'll ignore him at a diner to go entertain a woman. Lee spends much of the movie contemplating what Gene's sexuality even is. In a GQ article published in 2019 that explored this type of in-closet, out-closet relationship, one of the interviewees, Simon, discussed how he felt controlled by his partner who was closeted. It was a tough time. He would always tell me he wasn't like me and couldn't be because he had his whole future ahead of him. The idea of my future was irrelevant in that in some way admitting he was with me would ruin his made me feel worthless. Gay men aren't toys to be practiced on. While it's totally understandable why someone would not want to come out of fear for their safety or whatever, these relationships can sometimes lead to an uncomfortable power imbalance. By the end of Queer, Lee is the loser, still chasing Gene. Meanwhile, Gene has most likely moved on. Alex Abad-Santos writes for Vox about the patheticness of Lee's character. Lee's meant to be seen as someone that resembles the way we used to think about single, down bad older men before we dubbed so many of them daddy, and the others problematic. If you squint, you can see the tracings of a man in midlife crisis trying desperately to woo and buy affection from a much younger girlfriend or boyfriend who may or may not actively partake in a little gold digging. The more he's taken for a ride, the more harmless he becomes. The fluidity of power in these relationships highlight a contrast between queer relationships and heterosexual ones, especially younger women, older man couplings. Queer people can certainly bring normative gender roles and expectations into their relationships, but according to the study I read on kinship and lesbian age gap relationships, queer relationships require a constant act of creation and negotiation with traditional family structures. These relationships are often created from scratch without an example to follow, and they often don't follow traditional gender roles. Hence the meme, which one of you is the fork? At the end of the day, I think that most age gap discourse in media online is really centered on depiction versus endorsement, which comes down to not only media literacy, but the individual life experiences of the viewer. For example, I actually liked Sofia Coppola's Priscilla, a biopic based on Priscilla Presley's 1985 memoir, Elvis and Me. I thought the production did a great job of emphasizing the horrific grooming aspect of their relationship by casting Jacob Elordi as Elvis and Kaylee Spaney as Priscilla. The pair had a height difference of 16 inches. That plus the framing of the shots created this uncomfortable image of Elvis constantly towering over Priscilla. In real life, Elvis and Priscilla only had an 8-inch height difference. So the film's imagery, plus the fact that Priscilla's immaturity and age were continually brought up in the script, made it seem like, to me, this is depiction, not endorsement. However, I have also heard people argue that the movie still romanticized the relationship. especially considering the film's hazy, dreamlike style of cinematography. I also saw an Instagram reel with over 1.6 million likes that was depicting Priscilla and Elvis's relationship in this movie and being like, romanticizing it, which was concerning on so many levels. But I think what makes Priscilla a difficult case is that Priscilla Presley herself is still fond of Elvis and doesn't regret the relationship. And to respect her wishes and agency as the original storyteller, there had to be a bit of a romantic glint in the narrative. Also, Jacob Elordi and Kaylee Spaney are both beautiful people, and at least like when I was younger, I would support any kind of beautiful couple I saw on screen. I'm like, doesn't matter if they're toxic. I'm like, if they look good together, that's a win. Regardless of our personal interpretations, though, sometimes I feel like the anti-age gappers are aiming to prevent us from analyzing and interrogating these movies at all. When, there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. To me, it's like banning books, but I think most progressives would agree we shouldn't ban Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita because of a handful of misinterpretations. I also think that because so many of us spend more time online, there's a lot of blurring between online fandom culture and the offline world. For example, when I went to watch Sinners in the movie theater, I did my bad habit, which is, look for fandom discourse about online because I really liked the movie and I wanted to know what other people thought about it. And scrolling through tweets and TikToks, I was honestly baffled by how many people were angry at Grace, the fictional Chinese character, for essentially inviting all the vampires into the house. Like, people wrote about her as if she was a real person, writing dissertations, making these long videos about how she messed everything up due to her own selfishness, rather than sort of zooming out and seeing what role she served in the story at large and why her actions were necessary for the plot to move forward. This is just an example, but in general, I think fandom can be really fun. However, if we take these characters and their motivations like too literally, it can blur the artistic intent going on in the production process and lead to confusions on whether something is really an endorsement or just a depiction, and also just like muddies the overall themes and messages that the director, the writer are trying to say. Okay, so that's all I have, I think, for today. Let me know what you think about all the age gap relationship movies that we've seen lately, whether or not these types of stories interest you or whether or not you're like, get them out of here. I'm very interested. And once again, thank you all for listening to me, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.